Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Football Savant podcast. I'm your host, Travis Tyler, here to discuss some of the latest news and happenings in the football world. Today is Tuesday, October 11th, 2022, and we're talking college football with former semi-pro football coach and self-proclaimed football nerd, Tyler Williams. Tyler, glad to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you, man. Great to be here, and I like the self-proclaimed part. That's good.
Yeah. Well, that was how you introduced yourself.
Yeah, it's true. It's absolutely true. Absolutely.
So before we get into any of the on the field stuff that we've seen, let's talk about something that's come up, basically every week for the past 5-6 weeks. As most of my followers know, we've seen a lot of these college coaches getting fired. Seems like a weekly happening. This week we didn't have a college coaching firing, but we did see one of the hottest names in the college in terms of the openings in college football actually become available, and that was Matt Rhule, the head coach of the Carolina Panthers, was fired on Monday morning after a 37-15 loss by the Carolina Panthers. A lot of people think that he is the top candidate, or at least one of the top candidates going into the offseason for one of those opening jobs. And now he's available. The vacancies, it seems like it's down to him and Lance Leopold of Kansas as the top two guys, if according to most experts.
Sure.
We got Wisconsin, Nebraska, Georgia Tech, Arizona State, and Colorado, all looking for coaches at this point. Where do you think is the best fit for him out of those schools?
It's a great question, Travis. And let me just first say, and I'm sure you'll probably agree, I hate the world that we've gotten into. I mean, we've always kind of been in a world where coaches are on the hot seat. You don't get a lot of time, especially at some of these schools where boosters seem to kind of run the roost there. With that being said, it's just never good when we're going into week 7 of college football and we've got 5 major Division I Power 5 programs with head coaches. I think it sucks mostly for the kids that coach sat in their living room, talked to their parents, built a relationship. Odds are, unless they have some sort of family tie to that school, they're committing there because of the coach. So
yes,
I think it's just a terrible thing. It really sets the program back. And I, to be honest, I just really don't see a benefit to firing a coach 6 weeks into the season. I mean, if you're 6 weeks into the season and you're firing a coach, he was on the hot seat before these last 6 weeks.
Yeah. So it's something you could have done in the offseason.
Yeah. Why jeopardize not only these recruits, especially with transfer portal where you don't have to sit out a year anymore? I just don't see the benefit to it. If you're going to get rid of a coach, get rid of him in the offseason and bring somebody new in. With that being said, as it pertains to Matt Rhule, I've really been struggling with this because if I'm Matt Rhule, which of those jobs am I super interested in? Because they're all tough places to recruit.
Right.
They're all places that don't have a ton of, you can make a case for Nebraska and Wisconsin a little bit with some prestige there, especially with Nebraska. But, I mean, we're not talking like blue blood, Bama, Auburn, Ohio State, Clemson.
Auburn,
we're talking about some second. Yeah, absolutely, man. So I've really been struggling. If I'm Matt Rhule, do I go potentially the Saban rehab route? Do I, that has seemed to work for so many guys, Bill O'Brien, Sark, Kirby. The list goes on and on. Do I go the broadcast route for a year and see what other jobs open up? Because I'm sure you'd probably agree with this, Travis. Auburn's going to be open up by the end of the season, and I'd rather have the Auburn job than any of those jobs.
Yeah, I think that jumps to the top of the list once it becomes available. And at this point, I think everybody's expecting it to become available.
Absolutely. And if you look at it, Matt Rhule's from New York, went to Penn State, coached at Temple, obviously, right? Then went to Baylor. Those schools are just, none of them are really around the footprint. And that's not to say that you can't have success going somewhere that you don't have a footprint in at all. Man, if I'm Matt Rhule, I left college ablaze and went to the NFL, Carolina.
Yeah.
That didn't work out. I don't know if I'm so quick to jump into Colorado, Wisconsin, Georgia Tech, Arizona State, or Nebraska. That's my opinion, but I'm
Yeah.
curious to see, Travis, what you think about it.
Well, yeah. He's honestly, I don't think he was a fit for the NFL to begin with. That was a mistake to go there in the first
Agreed.
place. Um, and then he's going to have his pick of whichever ones he wants. I would say that going back to like the offenses that he ran and the type of teams that he ran at Temple and Baylor, they kind of fit that multiple running back, strong running game, play action off of it, uh, somewhat mobile quarterbacks depending on which year you're looking at, and dominant defense. And if you look at the jobs that kind of have that kind of identity throughout the history of the programs, it's three of them for me: Nebraska, Wisconsin, or Georgia Tech would be the type of programs that would fit the way he's approached the game from where he's been before. And if he's going to, for me, if he's going to take a college job, I think he ends up at Nebraska. But I also, and Wisconsin's also, a lot of people would say that that's Jim Leonard's job, and they're not really looking for anybody else. If you'll believe some of the reports out there.
That's what they seem to say for sure.
Yeah. And then I'm not going to say, like, I wouldn't say that I would overlook Georgia Tech on that one, just because it's kind of, he wouldn't have to move too far pretty much, for one thing. And then they have a veteran mobile quarterback who has a pretty solid arm when he's used it, that I think could fit in that offense. And then they're just the way their program has historically worked seems like it could be a fit for him as well.
Yeah, I'd agree. And the other thing, that's actually a really good point, Travis. And the other thing I found myself kind of trying to think about lately is what a change we've seen in college football, to where let's just, we don't even have to go back far, Travis. Let's just look at the last 5 years. Big coaching names that were going to take big blue blood jobs would it be fair to say Matt Campbell?
Yeah.
I'm drawing a blank on the guy from Minnesota.
PJ Fleck.
PJ Fleck, were guys who took routes very similar to other coaches did, where, hey, I was coaching a smaller school. Now I'll go to this kind of second, third tier school, and then I'll stay there for a year or two, and then surely Auburn or somebody will come calling. Right. I mean, when's the last time you heard Matt Campbell or PJ Fleck open up for a job?
Yeah.
Does Matt Rhule want to go from the image that he has right now of failing, which, granted, you nailed it in the opening. He crushed it in college, but man, that you go to a Georgia Tech or a Colorado or an Arizona State, and you have a couple seasons like PJ Fleck and Matt Campbell, and who knows? I mean, if you don't kill it and you have mediocre seasons like these guys have had, and Matt Campbell and PJ Fleck have had some really good seasons.
Yeah,
they're not in these hot coaching names anymore. They've been passed up by the Leopolds and Napiers and stuff, So I don't know. That's why I kind of was tossing around the Saban rehab route or broadcasting for a year, maybe waiting for an Auburn job or something like that. I think it's tough. And Colorado is always such a weird place to me because what do you think of, Travis, when you think of Colorado? I mean, does that anything come to mind for you? I mean, does that get exciting for you?
I mean, in my lifetime, in terms of like what I can remember from when I started following college football, they haven't been good. So
correct, and I think that's what most people.
Yeah,
and I think you're right. I think that's what most people associate. But here's the thing: they've proven I mean, granted, it's been a long time, but they've won a national championship there. And I've been on that campus in Boulder. I would be willing to bet that's a top 10 campus in the country. And you're in a major conference, Pac-12. I mean, it's just such an interesting place. I don't know if I'd want to go there from Matt Rhule, but it is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's got to be some appeal on some level there, but it's also, and I think it's a little enticing for a coach to try to turn around a program like that. But to me, they're not too, I mean, they're probably, I don't know, at best third on that list of the 5 openings.
I would agree. Yeah,
But,
absolutely.
maybe not even that high. Who knows?
Yeah, I think you're right, actually.
How about now let's get into some of the stuff that we've been seeing on the field lately. Um, week 6 was kind of not too crazy, but there I guess there were some surprising results out there. What was the most surprising thing you saw on the field?
The couple positives and negatives.
Uh-huh.
I've really been impressed with what Sonny Dykes has done at TCU. I
Yep.
mean, Cal's a tough place to recruit and win. You're in California, but you're up against UCLA, USC, and things. SMU again. I mean, that's a tough place. So
Mm-hmm.
he didn't get a great rep there, and it's so crazy when I think of Sonny Dykes because the guy's a college baseball player, but
Yeah.
he's a decent college football coach, and what he's been able to do at TCU in such a short span of time and how well they're playing to me is very impressive.
Yeah.
The other one is UCLA and Chip Kelly.
Yeah. I had that one too. Yeah.
When Chip Kelly first, I don't think people realize when Chip Kelly first took that job at UCLA, they were coming off a massive self-imposed sanction where they had a huge loss of scholarships.
Uh-huh.
There were stories that came out when he first took the UCLA job about legitimately not being able to field a scout team in
Yeah, I
practice and
remember
stuff.
that.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's tough. And you look at DTR. I mean, there was a time when Chip Kelly got there, DTR did not look like a Division I quarterback. I mean,
You weren't sure who the quarterback was going to be.
yeah, there's one game of a flash that I can remember of DTR. I think it was like 17 or 18 when they were up in Pullman in Washington State, and in the third quarter they were down 42-17, and they come back and put 60 points on the board and win. But that was like the only flash where you were like, okay, kind of a fluke game. And now they beat Utah, Washington, and it looks like they're potentially in the driver's seat, for the Pac-12.
Yeah. And
Josh Heupel, Tennessee. I mean,
yeah,
they're looking really good. They've got a big time 5-star quarterback incoming. I expect them, if they are even competitive, Travis, against Bama, I expect them to crush the recruiting cycle. And if they continue the path and they're even competitive against Bama and win a couple more games, I mean, Tennessee could be relevant again.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask my guest from last week, he thinks that Bama's going to lose that one this week. So we'll see. Tennessee's on the rise as good as they have been in the last 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the negatives that I had, really one is just what is wrong with Oklahoma? I mean, granted, I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, lost a lot of transfers, lost some graduates, lost a couple kids to the NFL. But here's the thing that I look for in a coach, and we knew the cupboard was bare when Venables took the job. He's a first-time head coach, but what I look for is not necessarily wins and losses, although Oklahoma fans and boosters and alumni, I'm sure, are. But Venables has been highly touted as this great-minded, defensive coach.
Yeah.
Oklahoma's defense looks lost. I expect you as a head coach to get your side of the ball quickly up and running and adapting and playing well, and that has just not been the case.
Yeah, and you give up 49 points to your biggest rival. That's just not what you expect from Oklahoma, period. Even if
or Brent Venables. You think about those Clemson defenses. I mean,
exactly.
Man, I did not look this up, so I want that to be on the record. I don't know that this is fact, but I want to venture to say that most of what Oklahoma lost was on offense.
Yeah. I think that sounds accurate to me. So yeah, I mean, to be fair, they've never had a great defense over the past couple of years, but
no, and I agree. And if they were playing SEC teams, I would say, okay, that's typical Oklahoma. But
yeah,
I mean, my gosh, when you're giving up 49 to Texas and you're losing to Kansas State and
give up 55 to TCU,
55 to TCU. I mean, they've at least had a good enough defense to stop that. Typically, that's what surprised me for sure.
Oklahoma. I was surprised on the other side of that how well Texas came out and how Quinn Ewers was good before I was surprised how well he played in that game, his first big rivalry game, just at the college level. And then I was also surprised by how easily Mississippi State handled Arkansas over the weekend. Even though Arkansas's got some injuries and Mississippi State's got that really great offense. Will Rogers working his way into some awards somewhere along the lines here too.
Yeah. And it's so funny, Travis, and I may be the only one guilty of this, but it's like every year I'm like, why do I always think that a Mike Leach offense is going to struggle? Like, why do I continue to do that 10 years later?
Yeah, I mean, he's proven that he's going to score points no matter where he is. So that's one thing that some of those SEC defenses are going to have trouble with the rest of the season against those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And you spoke on Quinn Ewers.
Yeah.
Interesting stat that I looked up the other day. So Quinn Ewers has 20 drives so far this year against Oklahoma, ULM, and Bama before he got hurt.
Yeah.
ULM was his arguably worst performance out of those 20 drives. Of those 20 drives, he's averaging 4.53 points per offensive drive. CJ Stroud, who's the Heisman frontrunner, I think most people would say, on the most explosive offense, is averaging 4.45 points per drive. Quinn Ewers is playing out of his mind.
Yeah. He's been one of the most impressive guys I've seen on the field this year.
100%.
So let's go back to that TCU. Go back to TCU and talk about their win over Kansas. What gave them that advantage to be able to pull out that win on the road there?
Well, this is probably low-hanging fruit that I'm grabbing at here, but I think most people would say that the most important part of that was Jalen Daniels, who's been putting a cape on and playing out of his mind like Superman. It was on the road to at least getting some Heisman votes. I mean, he goes down with a shoulder injury early in the second quarter and didn't return. That's a huge blow. It looked like the backup quarterback was not even close to Jalen Daniels in terms of style of play. So it looked like on the fly in a big game against TCU, Kansas was having to change their entire offensive approach against TCU. And when he goes out, they're down 7. So that's a game that if Jalen Daniels is in, they're hanging around down at half, down 7 at the half. That's a very winnable game in the second half. But you look on the other side of the ball, and TCU's quarterback, Duggan, 23 of 33, 308, 3 tuds, a pick, and a sack. Super balanced play calling. They had 33 passes, 31 rushes, averaging 5 yards a carry. And the interesting thing is you look at the stats, KU won time of possession. They had more passing yards, more rushing yards, more first downs, same amount of turnovers, and a sack. I mean, it's an impressive win by TCU, honestly.
Yeah, it is. And anytime, like Jalen Daniels was by far the best player on that Kansas team. And anytime you lose your best player, it's gonna, it's gonna hinder your chances to win a big game like that.
Yeah, especially when it's something I've never understood at the collegiate or the NFL level. It's like, Justin Herbert's backup, Chase Daniel. It's like Patrick Mahomes, who is their backup? I forget who it is off the top of my head. But a lot of these backups are, and granted, you're not going to have another Justin Herbert or Patrick Mahomes sitting on the bench, but they're not even close. Like, for instance, Baltimore. If Lamar Jackson goes out, you don't have to change the offense. Tyler Huntley can come in and do very similar, right? So a guy like Jalen Daniels goes out, and you have a totally different style quarterback. You got to change your offense in a game against a ranked TCU that's playing very well in the second quarter. You got to change your whole offense. That's going to be tough.
Yeah, definitely. So I know they were playing Vanderbilt over the weekend, but Ole Miss is now up to 6-0. How soon before they're more into the conversation with the Tennessee type of season in the SEC?
It's a great question. I mean, I don't think they're far from it. I mean, if you look at Lane Kiffin, I mean, what a turnaround since the USC, since he was at Tennessee and when he coached at the Raiders. I mean, that's why when we started talking about Matt Rhule at the beginning, I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe a Saban rehab. Not that he necessarily needs it, but we know what that does for your career. We've seen it done multiple times. And one thing that Lane has always done, even when he was losing, is recruit. And he just continues to recruit, continues to get guys to buy in no matter what conference, what team, where he's at. I just think he's done a really, really tremendous job. And if they continue to win big games, especially in the SEC, we know what that does for recruiting. Ole Miss is not a school that, doesn't have money in their alumni and boosters. They'll be fine when it comes to NIL. And the big thing for me is just, man, Kiffin is just so good at, whether it's him or he's got a team that does it, so good at modern social media and relating to kids. I don't know if it's an age thing or what it is, but to me, that's the huge key is he gets these guys that probably normally wouldn't go to Ole Miss, and he gets them to buy in. He gets everybody on the same page, and they win games. I don't know. I don't think it's going to be long if they continue to play like this. What are your thoughts on it, Travis?
Yeah, I think they're playing a lot better than I expected them to this year. And I think that I haven't seen a ton of their defense this year, but offensively, I think they can hang with those top, the other top 4 teams in the SEC, no problem.
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely. I think we all expect Lane Kiffin to have a formidable offense, good quarterback. Are you impressed with their defense?
Well, that's what I was saying. I haven't seen the little I've seen of their defense. Yeah, sure. But I haven't seen a ton of what they've been able to do on defense. They're definitely, from the stats that I've seen, they're definitely playing better than they had in recent years and better than I expected them to see, almost as good as that whenever they had that Landshark defense that they were talking about.
That's right.
A few years
Robert
back.
Nkemdiche and that was a good defense. Yeah, they're playing very well. Kudos to Lane Kiffin, and I got no ill will towards Lane. I like to see him do well.
Yeah, it's always entertaining when you have a team like that doing well when they weren't expecting to, and the take those steps to like kind of develop their talent further with a coach like that.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Sticking in the SEC, a lot of big things were expected from Kentucky this year, and they've kind of dropped a couple in a row and haven't looked particularly great, especially offensively this year. What's the issue better, particularly as it pertains to Saturday's game? Was it just like was it just that they were missing Will Levis, or what's your takeaway from that?
That's what it looked like, Travis. It looked like Will Levis at the beginning of the year was playing like Superman, putting his cape on and doing his thing. And it looked like the coaching staff seemed to think that method was going to work throughout the year is let's just get Will the ball, let him do his thing, whether he's passing, whether he's scrambling and buying extra time to keeping his eyes downfield, looking for receivers that are open, running that, I don't want to say read option, but, kind of that bootleg and power, power run by the quarterback. And it looked like they were just totally dependent. So when Will Levis was out, they were just unable to really get anything going. It looked like one of those games, Travis, where every yard was just so hard to come by. I mean, games tied at half, bad third quarter. They both scored 7 in the fourth. The big thing is South Carolina was able to get 6 sacks. And again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but the quarterback that came in played a totally different style than Will Levis does. He's a pocket traditional passer. So your offensive line blocks different because when Will Levis is back there, they know that even if I miss a block, Will's going to scramble around, keep his eyes downfield, make a play, or take off and run with it. This kid seemed to stand in the pocket. 6 sacks. I mean, that's more than they've given up in any other game by far this year. So trying to adjust to Sharon's style and how much different it is than Will's just looked like too much of an ask for Kentucky.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point with that. I think, yeah, at least for me, I've always felt more comfortable with my quarterbacks, on the roster, all playing a very similar style and having similar traits and assets. So I think that definitely really hard to adjust to, especially with the 1 week notice, basically, and playing. South Carolina's not great, but they're not. They're far from the worst team in the SEC, I would say.
Absolutely. And Travis, not to get too off track here, but I know you're a big NFL guy too.
Yeah.
What kind of prospect, while we're on the topic of Will Levis, do you think he is? I'm shocked because when I watched him at Penn State,
Yeah.
a little bit that he came in for Sean Clifford, he just never seemed like, he seemed like he'd be one of those guys that had a really good college career potentially if he found the right fit, and it seemed like he did at Kentucky, but never thought he'd be a big NFL prospect. But the more I kind of read and look at some of these mock drafts, I mean, a lot of people I respect have him going in the first round as a quarterback, and this isn't particularly a super weak quarterback class.
Right. I think like you'll see a lot of people that have him like in the top 10. I think that's too high, but I do like some of the traits he brings at the position. He's got a pretty strong arm. He's for a guy the size that he is, he's very mobile, and that's increasingly important at the NFL level these days. So I see the promise they see in him. I'm not sure I totally see first round prospect in that, but hey, it's a long season, and you can always continue to develop.
Yeah, sure. I guess the thing, and you're absolutely right about that, spot on, Travis. I think the thing that has always concerned me with Will Levis was he was there for some pretty tough Sean Clifford years at Penn State.
Yeah.
How do you not beat out some of those years where Sean Clifford just did not look like a major Division I quarterback?
Yeah, I mean that can come down to a lot of things. It can be like his development at the time or the coaching staff he was playing under and their decisions they were making. You never really know unless you were a part of that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've learned that firsthand being an Oregon fan with Ty Thompson. I mean,
Yeah.
the entire fan base was so pumped. Elite 11 winner, 5-star quarterback. Couldn't even beat out Boston College transfer Anthony Brown.
Yeah.
Then you can't beat out Bo Nix. 2 different coaching staffs made it seem like he wasn't even on the roster. I mean, he wasn't even going in garbage time. So it was like, hey, obviously I had to, take a step back and go, listen, I can watch all the highlights I want on YouTube and game days when he gets in a little bit, but they're there every day seeing him in practice. So obviously they're seeing something that we don't see. And Franklin runs a very much pro style offense. So,
yes, he does.
That could be a question of fit there as well for Will Levis. But sometimes you look at that and you're like, my gosh, Sean Clifford has looked bad sometimes. Then Will Levis goes to Kentucky and looks like Superman. You're like, how did this not work out?
And Clifford's one of those guys where you're like, how the hell is he still in college?
I call him. That's why I say all the time, he's the JJ Redick of college football. It's like, how many years can this kid possibly play? This is insane.
Yeah. Luckily, it's his last one. It should be, at least. So, okay, we've only got a few minutes left here, so I'm going to jump ahead to next week's games here. What are some of the matchups you're looking forward to the most this weekend?
Couple of them for sure. I think Penn State, Michigan is going to be a really good game. That's in the big house. That's going to be tough to win. But if you've watched any Michigan games, as good as Blake Corum and the run game has looked, J.J. McCarthy has looked just as bad trying to throw a deep ball. Super predictable play calling. You almost know when he's going to take a deep shot. And almost all of them have been 50-50 balls.
Yeah.
Penn State has a very good defense, especially with Joey Porter in that secondary. I think if they can stop the run, that's their ticket to winning in the big house. And then, of course, what a great slate of games. Bama, Tennessee, Oklahoma State, TCU, USC, Utah, Kentucky, Mississippi State. It's going to be a fun weekend, Travis.
That's a great weekend. In terms of that Penn State and Michigan game, I think Penn State's offense is probably the best offense that Michigan's played so far, and that's going to present a challenge for them as well.
Yeah, especially now that, Penn State struggled last year, particularly with the run game, which we haven't seen from a Franklin offense there. But Nick Singleton and them seem to really be getting the run game going. That's going to be tough for Michigan.
Yeah, they had one of the worst running games in the country last year, and it's so vastly improved this year that they just got them playing at a different level.
And that's where we saw, not that we haven't seen it before, but that's where you really see the display of Sean Clifford's limitations. He's a great game manager, but when you ask him to stand back and throw 40 times a game,
Yeah,
it's not usually going to end up well.
yeah, exactly. With that TCU Oklahoma State game you mentioned, do you think that could possibly be a Big 12 championship preview?
Yeah, I really do think it will be, and I'm interested to see how that plays out because you've got some longevity at quarterback for both sides of the ball
Yeah,
with Duggan and Sanders. I think it's really, honestly, very similar defenses, very similar offenses, savvy quarterbacks. I think where it's really going to come down to is coaching. And personally, I would give Mike Van Gundy the nod over Sonny Dykes.
okay, yeah. He's been at his current program longer, had a little more success over his career, so I wouldn't fault anybody for taking that as well. Another game I'm looking at here that might some people might overlook, but it's a Big Ten West matchup that usually a lot of people aren't paying much attention to. But you got a ranked Illinois team at 5-1 taking on a 4-1 Minnesota team. Nobody really pays attention a lot to the Big Ten West, but do you think either of those teams will continue to be in the Big Ten race throughout the rest of the year?
It's tough. I would say this. I would say
Or
this.
let's say Big Ten West race. They're not going to.
Yeah,
Nobody's
yeah.
going to beat the East. Obviously.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. And look, Illinois 5-1. They control their own destiny. Now, it made things a little interesting this past week because Nebraska won, Purdue won, Illinois won. So it definitely makes things interesting for sure. But I think with Illinois sitting at 5-1, ranked, they control their destiny, especially if they get a big win over Minnesota this week.
Yeah. Do you think they'll be able to find enough offense to hang with that Minnesota offense? Because last week they only put up 9 points in that win at Iowa.
It's going to be tough, and for it sounded like I was kind of dissing PJ Fleck there in the beginning, but he's a good coach, man, and
he gets buy-in from his players.
Yeah, man. I mean, they're rowing the boat down there. So
yeah.
I think it's gonna be tough. I personally like Minnesota in that one, but if Illinois wins,
I do too.
They're certainly in the driver's seat for the Big Ten West.
Gotcha. All right, we're running out of time here, so I'm going to just go one last question here. Do you have any upset picks for the weekend?
Upset picks. Yeah, let's see. I think my big one is Utah. And here's why.
I like that one.
We look at USC, and here's what I'll say. I think Lincoln Riley is better than any coach in the country at hiding their weaknesses. For instance, when you first glance and look, USC has the number one scoring defense in the country. Okay, so that looks really, really good because we all knew the offense would be good, but that defense wasn't good. Then you look and you turn around and you go, oh my God, number one scoring defense. Then when you dive in, though, they have the 102nd ranked rush defense. Now, how does that happen? Well, because they have an explosive led Lincoln Riley offense and they're playing with a lead. Now, because they play with a lead, that allows them to not have to worry about the run. It allows them to sit back and pin their ears when they know the quarterback has to throw. So how do you combat that? Well, you got to run the ball and you can't play from behind. And I think if there's any team that can do that, it's Utah and UCLA. So I think USC is going to have their hands full.